Hey guys, welcome to the team house. We are here tonight with Ross Ritchell. Ross served in 3rd Ranger Battalion and is the author of The Knife, which is a novel about the global war on terror. We're really pleased to have him here tonight. He is also getting his PhD at the moment, and we're going to get into all of it with him. It sounded like he's in a pretty hairy deployment to Iraq back in the day. And I take it that was, or was it, the inspiration for your novel, Ross?
Yeah, well, I only had one deployment, so yeah, if I had any inspiration in particular, that would have to have been it. Yeah, there was a lot of tie-ins to the fictional work based off of personal experience. Yeah,
Absolutely.
so I'd say yes. Long answer.
So, man, the first question we usually ask our guests is to hear their origin story. We'd like to hear a little bit about, your background and your upbringing and sort of what that path was that led you into the Army.
Yeah, well, so I came from an affluent suburb just north of Chicago. My high school is the same high school Donald Rumsfeld went to. It's a school of 4,000. It's called Nutria High School. Most kids go to college. If they go into the military, they're going to go the officer route usually. And when I was a freshman in high school, the towers were hit. And so I was in my freshman Spanish class when that happened. I remember it was, a really sunny, beautiful day out, and they canceled football practice that day. And I just remember being like, wow, everything's changed. And I grew up pretty insecure. I was the youngest in my class, but I was a good athlete and I always had a lot of friends, but didn't really ever believe in myself. I was always super competitive with myself. I was internally motivated. I never needed to be told to work out or anything. I was usually one of the first guys and last guys out of the gym and stuff like that. But I definitely was insecure. So I looked to, I would say, pop culture or sports figures for motivation and stuff like that, like role models. And obviously the military was a very salient point for me because when you want to talk about duty, pride, things that you can kind of build a persona around. I was a big reader early. I read The Longest Day by Cornelius Ryan when I was in 5th or 6th grade. And I kind of tacked on to the themes of brotherhood that I might have been lacking or maybe not feeling like I fit in, even though it looked like I fit in because I had friends and was a good athlete. But I never really felt like I belonged anywhere, I felt like. So I read a lot on the military. I had no family in the military. A grandfather of mine served in the Merchant Marine during World War II. But before that, I had 3 relatives that fought for the Union in the Civil War. One went missing and the other 2 were killed, one of which was killed by Sioux Indians. He was with the 7th Cavalry, 7th Iowa Cavalry, and he was killed by Sioux Indians in North Dakota or South Dakota, I can't remember. But his name was Marmaduke Betts. So pretty awesome name for a guy that was killed by Native Americans. But anyway, so I did not have the kind of classic military background lineage. That wasn't it at all. In fact, like I said, I grew up in an area where it was kind of like you go to college, and my parents really wanted me to try college. And I graduated from high school in '05. I was lucky enough, and I'm aware of that, I was lucky enough to take a year of college. But I was depressed there. I didn't want to be there, even though I know it was an opportunity that most people would be lucky to have. But there was a war going on. I had wanted to join when I was in high school. I had plans to be a Marine. But Pat Tillman was killed in 2004. And I was a junior in high school when that happened. I played free safety, and Pat Tillman was a safety linebacker in college. And so when he got killed, I researched him and read a lot about him. And he was a very impressive human being outside of his military experience, but then obviously to leave everything behind. So I kind of started thinking about joining the Army instead of the Marine Corps after that. And after I had my first year of college, I got back home after my spring semester in May. And 2 days after getting home, I enlisted in the Army without telling anybody. And I came home, I was like, hey, I enlisted, I'm leaving soon. And that was kind of it. And then I went in there. Again, I think a lot of people go in for different reasons. Everybody goes in for different reasons. Mine was definitely needing to prove myself to myself. I didn't have to prove myself to anybody. It wasn't like I had a dad who was like, you got to do this, or you can't come home. It wasn't like that. It was, I had that kind of personality for myself. Again, it tied into being insecure, for whatever reason that was. So I drank a lot in high school. That's when I felt like confident. I think was when I felt, a little bit less in my own head. Mm-hmm. So I saw the military, especially, a combat experience would be a way to either prove myself or maybe get killed and not have to worry about it, because at that age, you don't really have any perspective, but yeah, so then I was lucky enough to enlist with a RIP contract. So I got a contract for RIP, which is Ranger Indoctrination Program. Now it's RAS. And I signed up for 5 years because the recruiter was like, well, you can't get a RIP contract without signing up for 5, which of course, the first day I was in the Army, I met some dude with a RIP contract for 2 years. And I was like, dude, come on, this isn't a good start. But no, it was cool. I was the honor graduate in basic training. So they talked briefly about if I wanted to go to West Point or not, because I had a year of college. I thought about that for about 3 seconds. And then I was like, no, I want to go to Ranger Regiment. So I kept in the pipeline, went to Airborne, and then I got into Ranger Regiment in, I think it was April 1st. Or April 4th, might have been my first day, 2007. And our guys were deployed when I got there. So we had about 3 weeks, if my memory serves me correct, maybe 3 to 4 weeks where we were alone there without our guys. And when they came back, it was on. Yeah. It was so a pretty hairy experience. Yeah.
So without 9/11, I mean, I know you read a lot about the military, but did you have an inclination to go that way anyway? Without 9/11, do you think you would have gone regardless?
It's a really good question. So again, the insecurity would have been there whether or not there was a war. So I would have been, a young male in America who didn't necessarily know what to do. I knew I didn't want a regular office job. I remember really thinking that would just make me jump out of a window if I had, go to a normal job for 8 hours a day and just sit still, because I never saw myself doing that. Not that there's anything wrong with it, and I do it in a different way now anyway. But to me, I wanted to go to the NFL, and I'm 5'10", 180 pounds, so that wasn't going to happen, especially playing defense. But like the idea of not doing something conventional has always been in me, and I think that when the towers were hit, I remember thinking I'm going, and I still had 3 years of high school left. Mm-hmm. So I didn't even want to take the ACT, and I did not take the SAT. Mm-hmm. And I took the ACT once, and I was like, whatever. Like I was going to be a Marine, and then Pat Tillman got killed, and I was like, okay, what did he do? And I started researching, the Green Berets, and I started saying, well, I'm going to be able to get into the war quicker if I go to Ranger Regiment. And that was kind of how it happened, Yeah. So would I have joined? Probably. Yeah. Would I have felt the urge to join dropping out of college, which I did? Probably not. But then again, I was really depressed, man. Like it wasn't my spot. You know what I mean? Like now I'm getting a PhD. I've got 3 college degrees already. So clearly I like school. Right. But that it wasn't like I didn't like school. It was like my head game wasn't right. Sure. You know what I mean? It was wrong time, wrong place. And I'm sure the war going on didn't help, because I was reading up on what was going on all the time, being like, what am I doing here? I should be doing what guys are doing. You know what I mean? So good question. I think I would have ended up in the military. Top Gun was my favorite movie when I was a kid. Like I rented it so many times from Blockbuster that my parents were like, enough, like stop, find something else. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think I wanted to be a fighter pilot early, but I heard that if my eyes were bad, I couldn't do it. So then I started immediately thinking about being a Marine, because they had the best commercials when I was growing up. Oh, yeah. And that's how you think when you think that way when you're a kid, And so, so I thought, and I'm a marketing major, so I get it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I was thinking about that. And then again, when Pat Tillman died, it was like, all right, not being a Marine anymore, So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Marine commercials they've always been like
I think the word you're looking for is propaganda.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for
It
sure.
works.
I mean, hey, that's what it is.
And so you finished RIP, and 2nd Battalion was full, so you went to 3rd Battalion.
No, first bat was full. Second bat was available. I had 3 best friends in RIP. One of them went to second bat because he was a California boy. The other one recycled out because he forgot one of his shower shoes on a 12-mile march, so he had to recycle out and do RIP all over again. So me and my buddy he was from Maryland. We were both like, all right, we're on 3rd bat, and then the other California boy ended up coming to 3rd bat with us. But first bat was the choice. Like, you don't really. I didn't say, hey, I want 3rd bat for any particular reason other than it was closer to Chicago than second bat. But first bat would have been it for sure. Yeah.
What was it like going through RIP at that time frame? What was it, 2006 that you went through?
2007.
2007.
Wait, no, I'm sorry. It was 2007. Yeah, it was 2007. Yeah, it was March of 2007. It was the cadre were all, E6, E7s that had been on Tucker Gar, and like, like the golden gods, of what we wanted to be. So like, I remember the first day of RIP, they had this big old beefy dude who, looked like he could bench press a refrigerator. And he ended up just smoking us. He ran like 5:30 miles for like 3 or 4. I was like, who are these people? You know what I mean? And and then we had another one who just had us lunge all day. Like, we literally did lunges for probably 45 to 50 minutes, and nobody could go to the bathroom after that. When you were trying to squat on the toilet, it was like you weren't getting up. You either weren't going down or you weren't getting up. It was like, if you could just get there, you could sit, but your legs were dead. And so again, like, that was a great indoctrination to your life isn't really going to be what you thought it was, and you're going to start figuring out some new things pretty quick. So RIP was interesting. I went through with contacts. We weren't supposed to. And I remember one of the cadre looking like this, and he was like, Ritchell, you're wearing contacts, aren't you? And I was like, no, I'm not, Sergeant. And I was like, oh, dude, I'm totally wearing contacts right now. Because, like, my eyes are horrible, and I wasn't going to wear BCGs, which are, birth control glasses or whatever. But he was like, I know you're wearing contacts right now. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I totally was. But it was just like, he was scared every day. I remember the cadre coming in, like, at night when we were sleeping, and they're, like, spying on us. I was like, dude, where the fuck am I? You know what I mean? It was cool. Yeah, I mean, that's what I joined for. I dug it. I totally dug it, Yeah, it was a cool experience.
I remember when going through RIP, I went through 2003, and the instructors did like a health and welfare check of the barracks, make sure we're not getting into trouble. And so they're like, if you got anything, come forward. If you have any contraband you're not supposed to have. And this is how young and naive I was. I had comic books. I had Batman comic books in my locker, and you weren't supposed to have anything that's not like, if it's not on the authorized list, it's unauthorized.
Right.
So I brought them my comic books. I'm like, Sergeant, I have comic books. And they're like, look at it. And they're like, looking at the comics, like, Murphy, take these. Get the fuck out of here. Like, they were looking for like black tar heroin.
Right.
And here comes this 19-year-old kid with Batman comics. They're like, just go. Just go. Get out of here.
That's pretty good.
When the guys, when your guys came back from their deployment, how were you received? I imagine that things were a little bit, like, I went in 97 in a peacetime. So, there's a lot of, of the hazing and stuff like that. But I imagine that things were a little bit more focused, right, when they came back for you guys?
Well, if you look at my face right now, this is pretty good. It was, they lost the guy. So I actually had gotten a locker for a sergeant that passed away. Wow. Jimmy Regan passed away.
Yeah.
And so I actually got his locker, which was probably just a really raw deal, but that's what happens, But lighting it up a little bit, it was just one of the scariest things I ever had. Like, all these guys, I remember they're coming out, I was like, holy shit. Like, if you played sports at all in high school, when you were a freshman and saw the varsity go by, this would have been like, I was a football guy. So if I was a freshman in high school and I saw Alabama's national championship team come in, and I was trying to like have a locker the next time. That's what it was like. And they're like, who the fuck are you looking at? And I'd be like, I don't know, Sergeant. And I'd be like, I'm a fucking private. Don't call me a sergeant. And I'd be like, oh my God, nobody's wearing any rank because they're all in PTs.
Right.
I don't know who anybody is, So it was the first day when the guys were unloading their bags. One private who ended up being in my squad is a totally good dude, and another private ended up getting after it. And my squad leader, when I first got there, it was like, fuck this, we're going to fight. So first day, they took these two dudes down, our whole platoon went down to the combatives room, and he goes, I'm not having you guys do this bullshit. Here are gloves. And right away they squared off and fought. And they're like, all right, now let's make all the Whoas do it. And I remember we were all just like, what? Like, are you really gonna make us like, do this? And they didn't, but like that was the indoctrination. And those guys were dealing with stress. Like one of the guys was sitting next to Jimmy Regan when he passed. Mm-hmm. And then the other guy, these guys just came back from a pretty raw deployment. So like clearly they're all keyed up. I don't know about you guys, but when I got back from my deployment, we didn't have any like recovery time. I went from Iraq to Chicago in about 23 to 27 hours. You know what I mean? Like I literally left Iraq and I was home with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, within a day. You know what I mean? So like when I saw these guys, when they came back, it was super raw. But I remember, they had them fight right in front of us the first day. It was just a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, a lot of, scrambling. It was a very scary time. To say that I was intimidated was an understatement. And, I was always just sort of like, at rest or whatever. And they'd be like, what, can you bench press like 300 pounds? I'd be like, yes, but I can tell that's not a good thing. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, but yes, I can lift. It was just like anything they could find, they found it right away. And just, oh man, it was super intimidating, but yeah. So the reception was not warm, rightfully so, but I think it's super understandable given the circumstances,
And then how was that time for you where they start like integrating you, training you up? You're with all these guys who had, had at least one combat tour under their belt. How was that for you?
Well, so most of the guys that I was with probably had 3 to 4 easy. So I lost hearing in RIP. So I started having problems early in training where I couldn't necessarily hear very well on the comms. So training was great when we were doing PT because I could hang. You know what I mean? When we started going out doing shooting drills and other stuff, I was behind. They would have to say things twice. And I would have to look around and be like, I think that's what they want me to do or where they want to go. So I started getting a reputation as being either stupid or slow pretty quick. And so like guys who knew me, I think liked me a lot, but I think guys that didn't have any necessarily reason to think that I was somebody other than the fact that I didn't mess up. I never had anything on my record. I never got in trouble or anything, but I probably looked like a guy who didn't know what he was doing. You know what I mean? And so take that or leave it. How would you feel as an NCO when you're looking at a guy like me? You know what I mean? I can do everything right in certain ways, and in other ways you'd be like, why aren't you getting this? You know what I mean? So that was kind of what was going on for me.
Your hearing loss that started in RIP, was that due to the explosions and stuff like that, or?
I had an earplug fall out when we were qualifying, and I was just like, I don't care.
Right.
I just kept going. You know what I mean? And so I was like completely deaf for like 2 days. It sounded like, you remember those like Charlie Brown Christmas? His mom was like, wah, wah, wah. Like when I heard anything, it sounded like that.
Yeah.
And it was just horrible for 2 days. And I remember my 3 best buddies, and one of them had a last name right next to mine. So when we had to sound off our roster numbers, he would go like that. He'd just hit me in the shoulder when it was mine. And I'd be like, 2206. You know what I mean? Because I couldn't really hear what was being said. Thankfully, my hearing came back enough that, like, I was able to kind of hide with however bad everybody else's hearing was. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then after my deployment, it was really loud and stuff. And they're like, yeah, you can't have your job anymore, or you can get out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm getting out. So that was it. Yeah.
What was it like then? I mean, now you're having to deal really with what it is. It's a hearing disability, but also going through this train up, getting ready to deploy to Iraq.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. So I broke my ankle or fractured my ankle on a rope training about 2 months before we deployed. So not only did I have the hearing thing, and my ankle was all messed up, and they had me in a boot. And I went to the doctor, and I was like, "Am I good to go?" He's like, "Well, you're good to go when you think you're good to go." So I gave him the crutches right away, and I was going because I really wanted to deploy, obviously. So yeah, I went in pretty gimpy. I realize it now. I definitely I let my insecurities probably be a pretty big liability. When I was on the objective, it's hard to find out where fire's coming from anyway. But for me, it was like, it always seemed like it was 360. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because to locate it, how? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's just kind of echoing in my head everywhere, And I remember my ankle when I had to sprint and stuff, I'd feel it. I definitely wasn't ready probably, but I mean, are you kidding me? I dropped out of college for that. I was going.
Right.
So yeah, sorry. I don't think I answered the question too well.
No. I think you did. It's just about your kind of train up for Iraq and getting ready for that deployment.
Yeah. So we were supposed to go to Afghanistan. So the deployment was for Afghanistan, and they switched it 3 weeks before. It was there was the big surge, you know what I mean, in Iraq, and there was a mini surge with JSOC heavy. And we were the mini surge before the conventional surge. And so they switched us from the Afghanistan plan. And I still remember, they brought our platoon in together, and they're like, "Hey guys, change of plans. We're going to Iraq." And everybody cheered. And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." Because that was the war at that point. Mm. Afghanistan had quieted down a little bit, and Iraq was the run and gun. You know what I mean? It was, summer of 2007 was when we were training up for it, and then it was fall football season. I still remember when Appalachian State beat Michigan. It was one of that big upset in college football. Was that happened right before we deployed. So that's when Iraq was really hitting on all cylinders. And so when they told us we were heading to Iraq, it was very short term, and the guys just cheered, and I hadn't been anywhere. I just wanted to go somewhere. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, it was, I was anxious. I felt as ready as you could. But I think the whole time you're what's it going to be like? You know what I mean? Am I going to flake out? Am I going to be a pussy? All those things, and
what was your first impression when you stepped off the ramp of the plane when you hit the ground in Iraq?
First impression came before that. First impression of Iraq was when the ramp dropped, because that's when I could smell it. We came into BIOP, which is Baghdad International Airport. And it was actually funny because my girlfriend was I didn't talk to her on the phone because everything was at that point, they were very into OPSEC. So I had Facebook, and they made me get rid of this. It was 2007. I haven't had it since, but so they made me get rid of it. They instilled into our heads, you can't say anything over the phone. You can't say everything over, computers or whatever. So I was not going to mess that up. Mm. But I remember the last time I saw my girlfriend before I deployed, I was like, "Hey, just so you know, change of plans. We're going to Iraq." And I was looking around and making sure there weren't microphones in my room. Right. But and she's like, "Oh God." And she was like, "Just tell me you're not going to Baghdad." And I was like, "We're going to BIOP." Which of course is Baghdad International Airport. And she's like, "Oh, okay, I feel better." I was like, "All right, sweet." Some misinformation there. But anyway, so when the ramp dropped, it was the smell. It very, very unique smell. And one of our sergeants, I remember him shouting out, he goes, "There it is, boys." and it smelled like rotten. It kind of smelled like rotten fruit. It was the burn pits, of course. It was the burn pits with the heat, and it just smelled because again, like the countryside of Iraq is beautiful and it smells really nice, but like the burn pits are toxic, A, and B, it just is a horrible smell when you combine that with airplane exhaust and with humidity and heat. And so it was the smell first impression. And that's where I was like, I've never been anywhere like this before. We flew in the middle of the night, landed at night. I remember being petrified when we got all of our equipment onto like the little coach buses or whatever they were to take us to our tents, because we drove through all of these barricades. And I just remember looking up and being like, anybody who just lobs a grenade over is going to take us all out right away. Like, we're trapped. You know what I mean? And of course, it was probably like super safe. But I just remember like all that anxiety driving through those little mazes of concrete walls. It was just like, where the hell am I, man? So it was pretty interesting. Yeah.
And so you're at BIOP, jocking up for ops in Baghdad itself. I mean, what was your platoon's mission? What were you guys briefed on? What you were there to do?
And again, I'm not gonna like, this is all fine, right? Like, okay, yeah. So we were going after Iranian bomb makers. Yeah, that's what we were briefed on. So we were tasked with identifying, apprehending, and eliminating Iranian-backed bomb-making teams, basically. Yeah, and that took us where we went. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And something that's not like, it's been reported, but not widely reported. I mean, I'm looking at like Sean Naylor's book. He wrote, there's like maybe a chapter about, about the JSOC task force going after Iranians and then getting stood down like multiple times. Yeah. What was your experience?
So you have to see this. I was a private. So again, whatever intelligence I was given was filtered out probably 3 or 4 times already.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I was usually told where we were going right before it happened, and I didn't go a whole lot. You know what I mean? Like, they don't usually take the new guys out all the time if they don't have to. I was assigned a sniper overwatch team, so when I went out, I was primarily with them on rooftops, which is interesting because it's like you almost feel like you'd be a little safer if you weren't in an isolated 4-man team. But like, that was really interesting. So we had a couple of instances where we were ready to go and stood down. I remember one instance where they were like, hey, we're going to this compound. It's remote, it's isolated, it's really big. And then whether or not it was true or not, we got intel that I guess some of the cooks in the compound had told people where we were going, or that was a rumor. And whatever got back to me and the guys that I was with was that the people were expecting us and they had everything zeroed in with mortars. And they were just going to light us up right when we got off the half, you know what I mean, or the gaff or whatever. So they called down something like that. Yeah, I mean, we tried to hit everything at night. Obviously, when you're going into more populated areas, you don't want to go in during the daytime, because when you do, it's more dangerous than when it is at night, and it's not safe at night by any means anyway. So, yeah. Yeah.
What were those
it was interesting.
What were those first couple missions like for you, just from an internal perspective? Like, what did you think? How were you feeling? Like, did you feel like you had arrived?
Well, so again, I just want to preface everything. I was not G.I. Joe. I was a private, and I didn't go on a whole lot. I went on a handful with the sniper overwatch team, and then I was traveling everywhere, the CSAR team, which is command search and rescue. So when I was in there, I was leaving multiple times a day, going outside the wire. But when I was with the sniper overwatch team, that was a different kind of intensity, because I remember feeling like, when do I go over the wire? Like, you read a lot about Vietnam, and you're like, you left the wire. You know what I mean? It was almost like there wasn't a wire. It was like you could get blown up at any checkpoint. You know what I mean? Anywhere you go, you could get fired at. So I remembered slowly, but also quickly realizing that it was on when the missile defense systems would siren and go off while we were sleeping. And so the idea of being like blown up in your tent kind of like broke the cherry, so to speak, of being like, yeah, you're not safe really anywhere.
Right.
But that was a really cerebral experience, was just the notion of being like, you could get it at really any time,
right.
you know? So I remembered feeling like everything went too fast, but it was going slow enough where I could operate, if that makes sense. Because the training is really good, obviously, and the adrenaline helps you focus.
Yeah.
But I do remember it almost seemed like you were on one of the walkways at an airport a lot, where you walk a little faster than normal and your footsteps sound a little too loud. And I remember, like walking down the streets in Iraq, in Baghdad proper, and just being like, the dogs are out barking, and you'd look down an alleyway and see like 300 pairs of cat eyes just staring at you. And just being like, how are we not going to get opened up on from all of these windows within like the next step or two? You know what I mean? So it was just really like your breathing is too loud. You know what I mean? And your kit is too heavy, even though it's all tied down and taped up because your sergeants check you and because, they're mindful of it because they've done it for 4 or 5 deployments anyway. So it was really it was just like the intensity of football, but you're not playing with a ball, you're playing with lives. You know what I mean? So It was just like everything was just turned up to a 10 all the time. And the sensory stuff really is probably the stuff that I can still remember. I always, whenever I walk by construction sites now on a humid day, that's Iraq to me. Like I smell the dust and the heat and the moisture, and that's what Iraq smelled like to me. So it's like I can still remember it vividly. I remember certain body odors very well. I remember, I got a lot of flashbulb moments where you just kind of like, yeah, I remember that real well, So very intense to answer your question, Dave. It was just, I mean, it's funny because like every book you read is like, be careful what you wish for. You know what I mean? But that's totally what it is. It's like the stove's hot, and yet how many people are still going to go touch it just to see? You know what I mean? It's like, it's still hot. And I think the idea of like, one of the movie props they use where you're going to smash the like action thing, that notion where that doesn't happen, it's just always kind of on. Right. Was the weirdest thing for me. Yeah. There's no like, okay, go. Now it's for real. That wasn't what it was like. You know what I mean?
Like playing football, and I'm not a football guy, but my understanding of the premise of it is that it's putting the very best guys on that yard line at that moment, and they're going to play. Maybe they're just going to play 5 seconds, 3 seconds in a play, but they're going to give 100% for that very short duration. You're seeing those thoroughbreds on the field. But you're saying your experience with war was the other way around, that it's this sort of like long duration period of time where...
it's just I ran a marathon in 2016, and it was just like, hey, you want to go beat yourself up for 3 or 4 hours? There you go. It's like that, but it's day after day after day after day. And what happens, at least for me, is like you just don't care anymore. Right. You're just like, okay, this is it.
You just become numb to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is it. You know what I mean? Like I remember flying, like I went from not flying at all to being on a CSAR team and flying 2 to 3 times every day. And when that happened, the first night we got a rocket shot at us. So like, the RPG was shot at us, and so we banked up like that, And that was my first time in a bird, or in a Black Hawk at least. And so it was like from that being the starting point, and then the next time you got in it, and the next time, and the next time, and the next time, sometimes you'd shoot back at people. Other times you wouldn't. Sometimes you take evasive action, and it was just like eventually you fall asleep in the helicopter. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like eventually you just are tired, and so you don't care anymore. Whereas in the beginning, like you won't sleep for a day after that because you're like, what just happened?
Right.
You know what I mean? But then it's just normal, you know?
It's
it's interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you said, it's like everybody can tell you that stove is hot, but you're going to touch it anyway. And that's true.
Yeah, for sure.
That's true. And the thing is that had you not touched that stove, then you'd be sitting around today, successful in whatever endeavor you were in, going, I really wish I would have touched that stove. Was it really hot?
Well, and that's the thing is I think a lot of the things that drove me there in terms of like insecurities and stuff like that, obviously they're still with me. Like I didn't find security there. You know what I mean? Like I developed all the different set of things that might have answered other things, but like, I'm glad I did it because I did something hard. Right. You know what I mean? And I chose to do something hard, and I take pride in that aspect of it. But I definitely talked to a lot of people who are like, yeah, like I wanted to do it and I didn't. And I don't judge that because I get it. And I was scared shitless when I was there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's not like I can judge somebody for that. But yes, if I hadn't done it, Dave, I would have to this day been like, I wonder how hot that stove was. Mm-hmm. And then if I had talked to somebody like me, I'd like, it's fucking hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's really hot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's kind of what it's like. You know?
As this deployment went on, did you have any sense, or did the task force have any sense of that you were rolling back these IED cells, that you were kind of making a difference?
Good question. You probably have to talk to the command guys to that. I mean, the beginning of my deployment was on a line with Sniper Overwatch, and then I went to CSAR. So it was almost like I went from my specific set to every time JSOC flew any mission in Iraq, I was flying. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, instead of knowing what was going on anymore, we just knew whenever something was going on.
Right.
Because whether it was green, red, or blue, we were flying. You know what I mean? And so it didn't matter who it was, we were flying. You know what I mean? And so the Air Force guys, the PJs were awesome. Like I really, really, really liked working with the PJs. They're super bright, the guys that I were with were super bright, super nice, very, very professional, very interesting and unique. I don't know how much of a difference it made. I know, the mission in Sadr City that I was on, we did not catch the guy that we were trying to catch, but we got into a whole lot of trouble anyway.
Yeah, let's go into that mission. I'd really like to hear about that. Where the Ranger Regiment and the SEALs, what are the SEAL team guys? You guys had a team up going into Sadr City. So I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Yeah. So I haven't talked about this. I was told everything's classified or whatever, but pass. I don't think I'm gonna get in trouble for it. But so it was actually the anniversary of it was two days ago. So on the 20th, I believe, or 21st of October, we were trying to find a Iranian bomb maker in the area of Sadr City, Iraq. And we were ready to go around midnight. It was a gap, which is round. So we were taking strikers in. We were ready to go at midnight, and they kept pushing back the time because they were waiting to get the go call, and they kept pushing back the time, and they were waiting to get the go call. And we got the go call at about 4:30 in the morning. Oh, wow. And I remember we were like, well, are we going? This is Sadr City, right? And it's 4:30 in the morning, and everybody's looking at their watch, and the sun is starting to come up basically as we're about to go into the strikers.
Right.
And so I just remember being like, well, they're going to call it off. They're going to call it off. They're going to call it off, right? And they're like, no, they didn't call it off. So we went in strikers, and my first squad leader who cycled out to become a weapons squad leader was actually the gunner on the striker. And I remember a lot of the speed. And when you're a striker, you have to kind of use your core and your legs to kind of balance yourself, because when you get speed in those things, they're so powerful. It's not like you're sitting like this, you get kind of jostled around. And I remember I could feel how fast we were going based on how much I had to tense myself. And then my squad leader just starts opening up, and he's in the turret, and he doesn't have a 50, and he's using his M4, and he just pop, 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 pop. and we're still driving at a high rate of speed. And then I start hearing all these things hitting the side of our striker. And it sounds like, what you hear about, where it sounds like hail hitting the side, and it's a bing, 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 bing. And we were getting shot at with AK rounds or whatever. And so we were taking fire probably for about a minute or two before we even stopped. And when we did stop, we went from however fast we were going to stopping. And so all of a sudden we stop, door goes down, and I'm the first dude off. This is my first taste of combat. And I am the first guy off, and I'm just like this. And right away I see, an old woman and 3 kids like shooing their kids inside. And I'm like looking around, like trying to get ready to engage or whatever. And like, Ritchell, grab the ladder. And like, so I forgot my job was to help grab the ladder for Sniper Overwatch. Thankfully, I did the right thing with my training, which was like, get up and be ready to engage.
Right.
But yeah, like I had to like go back into it. So I'm the first guy off. And so I have to go back into the striker and grab the ladder. And we needed the ladders to scale into the compound. So thankfully we got them all. I got
Ross,
out.
Just to understand the composition of the team, I mean, was it at this point the operation was just Rangers, or were the SEALs embedded, or did they come later? How did that work?
No, we were tasked up evenly. I think I might have had 3 SEALs with me because again I was the Sniper Overwatch.
Okay.
So I was under the impression that this was a kind of sampling where they were having, for really kind of the first times, you were having 2 different JSOC elements doing DA together. Mm. So we were training together to go on the objective together.
Okay.
Like, and so that's like the composition of the force was something like, a platoon of Rangers. And then I think it was like maybe 2 squads of SEALs from SEAL Team 2 or 10. No. And so like, I think I had the SEAL CO and striker, and I think he had like 2 guys with him or whatever. And I might be wrong, that I can't really remember, but I remember that's kind of how it was split up. And then you probably had the line squads and Ranger Regiment all in one. You know what I mean? But like for me, I was on Sniper Overwatch, so I was with my 2 sniper sergeants and the other specialist that was with me. And then the rest of the guys in there were, SEAL guys. So that was the composition of it, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
I think we probably had 5 or 6. We probably had 5 or 6 strikers. And so, yeah, like I was the first guy off. When I got off, the dust was still settling. Like this was not a gentle exfil. This was a hot exfil. This was a fast exfil. And then we were in Sadr City. The sun was up. We had to go to the objective was a schoolhouse. So it was a big, big compound in the middle of, Sadr City, and everybody and their mother knew we were there, and they came, and we scaled the walls, we cleared the compound. The target was not there, but the people that came were there in force, and the CSAR team that I was tasked out to for the rest of the deployment were seeing the mission in a talk that was not in BIOP. So like people, I guess, heard about this mission pretty far away, and General McChrystal mentions it in his biography. And so it was a mission that was kind of said to be like Little Mogadishu. And everybody kind of like Hollywood's everything anyway. But I do remember when we got back, one of the squad leaders was like, "You motherfuckers!" Like he was like jealous that he wasn't on it. You know what I mean? So. And for me, it was just like, I remember being like, is that how everything is? And they were like, no, that's not how everything is. And it was just really, it was very scary. It was very overwhelming. It was sobering. I looked at my watch at one point, it was 6:30 in the morning. And I remember just being like, I'm getting shot at, I might die here. And my buddies were probably, like having a good time together in college or whatever. I was like, what did I do? Yeah. Like, what was I thinking? Yeah. You know what I mean?
What did happen when you got to that schoolhouse, you guys secured the objective, and then the Mongolian horde just comes down on you guys?
It was just, we need to get out of here quick.
Yeah.
This is bad. we're not going to be able to hold this. So they actually called in helicopter gunships. They called in a tank. They had the strikers knocked down, at least my striker knocked down the compound wall, dropped its door. So we ran in to the striker. We were there for about an hour and a half. They started engaging targets with the helicopter gunships, and there was the civilian casualties were reported in the press, which is awful. That was hard to deal with because it was all over the news before we got back.
Right.
Like we got back to the compound and it was already on CNN. You know what I mean? And listen, I'm a softie at heart. Like I didn't want to kill the wrong people I didn't kill anybody, but I was part of it, and I had to take people off and isolate people or whatever. And so that was one of those things where we didn't have a scratch. Like literally nobody in our element took any kind of wound. But to see what we dealt out was really pretty intense. Like, the first counts were over 100. You know what I mean? And then as the reports and the press came out, it was anywhere from like 49 to 76. You know what I mean? And of course, my thing, most of those counts were reports of civilian casualties. And so I'm thinking the higher totals might be true because the locals might not want to count combatants, but the civilians might be legit, or whatever. But anyway, it was one of those things where like, it just shows you how bad things can get, how quickly they can get it. It was one of those things where it's like, hey, you want the war, here it is. You know what I mean? And it was really crazy because after we were leaving the objective, an IED went off, and it was like all this noise. And I remember the detritus fell through the open hatch, kind of like sprinkled down like confetti, and then it was just quiet. And that was it. It was over. And we drove back quietly for 30 minutes. And then the guys had like spicy chorizo burritos. And I went and worked out and called my girlfriend. And then she goes, hey, this is the only time the whole deployment she asked me. She goes, hey, I just saw something on the news. Was it you? And I was like, nope. And then right when I saw her, like in person, I was like, you were right. Like that was us. And she's like, yeah, I had a feeling. You know what I mean? And she was like, I didn't watch the news or look at it at all when you were gone. And that one day I saw it and I had a really bad feeling. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, well, you're a smart lady. So it was intense. Yeah.
I think for maybe the people who aren't aware of sort of what Sadr City was and why that name is kind of mythical, I guess. It's an area in Baghdad, but can you describe like what Sadr City is like and why going to Sadr City, and especially like at 4:30 in the morning, why that's particularly harrowing?
Well, the term slum is a really derogatory word in my opinion, because people live there, make a living there, and people die there. But what that is meant to describe is a lot of dwellings that are not necessarily structurally sound, packed together, combined with a lot of people. So that's what Sadr City was like, at least where I was at. It's a population dense area with a lot of little, corners and small spots to hide and whatnot. And going there at night, again, you would be overwhelmed quickly if there was a large engagement. And when you're going door to door, house to house, you usually try to go in silently so you don't wake up the neighbors. So when we went in during the daylight hours, everybody knew we were there. So if anybody wanted to come fight, which they did, they can do it, and they know the area. We don't. So it's almost like, think about your hometown. Like if your hometown is like, hey, they're at the football stadium. Well, guess what? 20 different ways to get to the football stadium. You know what I mean? And then you can get there quick, And so the schoolhouse was like a 3 or 4 story And I remember just like you could see rooftops everywhere. And so it was just like they could come at you from any angle.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it was just like it wasn't a good spot to be in. You know what I mean? And clearly it wasn't. We were there for an hour and a half, and it was literally like I don't think we had any intervals of quiet during the whole hour and a half. It was just constant, small arms, and then, had larger, armaments and whatnot. The 50 cals were just like it was just really intense. We were very lucky. And again, like, hearing about civilian casualties, it breaks your heart. Like, obviously, I don't stand for that. I'm against that. But at the same time, it's like, how the hell would that not happen?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, when that kind of stuff is getting thrown around.
Right.
Daylight hours before people go to work. Right. Before people go to school. It was a Tuesday, I think. Like, I mean, it was just like, man, it was just a total shit show. And I just don't know how we didn't get a scratch, dude. Like, not a scratch. Well, it was really, really overwhelming. Yeah.
Muqtada al-Sadr, like he was a thorn in the U.S.'s side the entire time because he would, he had the Jaish al-Mahdi, right? And they were kind of bunkered in Sadr City, and they would conduct operations against U.S. forces. And then anytime the U.S. started to press him, he'd go, "Whoa, I'm just a simple cleric. I'm a religious man." And then, the U.S. would back off and go, "Okay, all right, you're a religious man." And he had political pull. And so it was this constant for years. I mean, since the beginning of the war almost, it was this constant accordion with him and his forces.
Yeah, it was, I mean, nothing's easy in any war, but I mean, just like you see what's happening in Afghanistan now, it's like, man, there's so many different ribbons and ties to everything. And it's a big quilt that we didn't make. Right. It's not, so we don't even know what's going on, but then we go in there and start shifting things, and we start, if there's 10 or 20 or 100 different themes going on before we even set up shop, when we set up shop, it's 1,000. You've got so many different narratives going on. And so it's just like, wow, like I remember like when we were on the objective sometimes, like, how do we even know these are the right guys? You know what I mean? Like, just because this is the intel, where do we get the intel from? You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? It's like that kind of thing. Like, the intel might be great, but it might be given by somebody who's got a bone to pick with you. Right. You know what I mean? Like, it could be, yes, we got the guy who we wanted to get, but wait a minute, is that even the right guy? Right. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of that thing where it, for me, it was overwhelming to see stuff and not be able to think like, wow, this doesn't seem like it's going to end well. You know what I mean? Like, I it was hard to be like, this is a winnable war because, and I think, that's what's going on a lot with Afghanistan right now is like, in my opinion, it's like you can be in a conventional force, a JSOC force, whatever your job was. And in your little war, you can feel like you're winning or you won all the time. But that's just one slide of the movie. You know what I mean? And so it's really weird to look at it like that and be like, you really don't know what's going on or if you're really making a difference. Because again, like you could do everything right and we still pulled out of Iraq and we still pulled out of Afghanistan. You know what I mean? And ISIS came in after Iraq and now the Taliban's in control. So it's just like, wow, like it's not surprising to see that a lot of people have really hard feelings about certain things. And I think what people just need to do is like, hey, you did what you could. You know what I mean? And hopefully you feel pride in the effort of it. And I've seen a lot of anger and I get the anger. But again, like if I never got the DGI, Joe, because my service ended pretty quick, but I have, taken like solace in the fact that I did something hard and I did it to the best of my ability. And that's me. That's it. You can't, this isn't a script. The stove's hot. You know what I mean? Like people get burned down, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think people come into a lot of things with expectations. You know what I mean? And Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It was a really, you know what? I felt like a journalist now that I look back on it, because I had one deployment and it was pretty intense. And then I was like sucked back, and that was it. Mm-hmm. Never got normal for me. Mm-hmm. Never got normal for me. Mm-hmm. My one of my best buddies, I think he's had like 14 deployments, and he read my book and he was like, how did you remember so much stuff? He's like, I can't remember that much, and I've done it like 11, 12, 13 times. And I was like, well, good question. And I was like, I think it's because I only did it once. Right. And so it never stopped being outrageous to me.
Right.
It never got normal.
Right.
Like, that's what you think about. Like anybody, it never got normal. Anybody who's done it for a couple of times, but even guys who were just like, think about it. If you're in Afghanistan or Iraq for like 18 months, that is crazy.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you've had like 5 to 10 deployments, it's like things got normal for you after a while.
Right. And everything just bleeds together. Yeah.
Exactly. And for me, it didn't. It felt literally like I put my head in a wind tunnel, and then all of a sudden it just got sucked back out. And I was like, what was that all about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it was a really weird experience.
So you're kind of saying I'm sorry, I was going to say that. So you're kind of saying like a guy who has slept with one woman is really going to remember all the details of it. And a guy who slept with 100 women is going to be like, I don't even remember her name. I don't remember what color hair she had.
There's probably a couple of professional athletes that you have to run that by. Yeah, movie stars. Yeah, I would not be one to speak that. My wife's my lady. But yeah, I think that you're probably right about that. I'll tell you what, I've got 5 kids, so I can tell you as a parent, that is a notion I understand. You can say, oh my God, I remember all these diaper changes. I'm like, dude, I've changed 3,000 diapers. They're all the same. I have no idea.
Right.
You know what I mean? I can diagnose any food they've eaten based on smell, but it doesn't faze me. I get poop on my fingers every day, and that's just what happens. And that's it. You know what I mean?
Before we move on, was there any other significant events from that deployment that you think we should touch upon before moving on?
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about the people there, and I think I took pride in trying to be a good human being when I was there. I didn't buy into the fact that they were evil, or that I tell people a lot, like I kind of looked at it as like, hey, if I had not been born where I was, I probably would have been on their side. You know what I mean? Like take my age, my demographic, and put me in the Middle East, and I might have been fighting against us. So like, if you can look at war that way, things that are binary and very simple and black and white become very gray and very hazy. And that's where I think you need to sit. You need to think about war and that haziness, because when you think about right and wrong all the time, it gets really, really, really shady really quick. Because I saw things that I'm not proud of. I saw things that didn't sit well with me, and I got a hell of a lot of buddies that do too. And so it's like, if you can just kind of say like, war's messed up because war is never the same, and it's always different for everybody, and everybody is reacting with very primal instincts. Things that shouldn't happen. You know what I mean? And I think you're looking at a lot of like the Eddie Gallagher stuff and SEAL Team stuff, and it's just like there's a lot of things that happen that aren't going to get play. You know what I mean? And so it's just like, have some humility. Try to not have your chest bowed up all the time and act like you're hot shit all the time, because what's that really going to do? And also, like, I didn't go to Afghanistan. I really wanted to, but have you guys seen pictures of that? Like, these are beautiful places. Beautiful places with really strong people. Iraq was just gorgeous, man. Like, when we were flying back from missions or to them and the sun was going on or coming up, you'd pay people to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it was just some of the prettiest stuff you've ever seen in your life, and it's just really crazy to think about, my insecurities drove me to that kind of insecurity. It was a lethal insecurity. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important for people to just try to figure out who they are and what they want out of life, because life's good. And if you don't think it is, you go see some people who are dead and shot in the face. It's not pretty. You know what I mean? Like, seeing dead kids is not fun. You know what I mean? Like, I remember one time we were flying at night, and I could see for miles out on the horizon because we were in the desert, and all of a sudden this light comes out like a lightsaber, and I was just like, what's that? And it was infrared. I had my nods on or whatever, and so all of a sudden the thing was down, and then and so the house got blown up, and in the middle of the desert, and within 6 seconds the whole thing was gone. So if I hadn't seen it, you know what I mean? If I hadn't seen it, it's like those people still died. Right. Whoever was in there was still gone.
Right.
But I remember looking at the guy who was sitting next to me on the bird, and he saw it too, and we both go, whoa. And the guy sitting behind us in the door had no idea what happened. It's like the war was going on all around us. You know what I mean? And then other times I'd see like one camel walking by all by himself. And it might, like, that's how it was in biblical times. It was just like, just so many highs and lows. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's really crazy. One time we picked up a guy in a suit, and he didn't say a word to us. And we picked him up in like dirt. We dropped him off on marble floor. I have no idea where he was. We dropped him off on a place in the middle of like a palace, and there was green marble floor that we landed on in a Black Hawk. So there's just so many weird things going on all the time, and it's very disorienting, and it's very weird. And I mean, again, I was lucky. I got shot at a couple times, and that was it. I mean, and I think I didn't do it long enough to hate anybody. I didn't do it long enough to stop being a good person. When we went into an objective and there were little kids crying, I would wave at them and try to make them happy because it made me sad. I didn't want them. I had an American flag on my shoulder. I didn't want to be a bad guy. You know what I mean? So that was my war. You know what I mean? I wasn't one of the guys who would bash, a guy's head in as we were putting him into a striker. You know what I mean? Saw it though. Like it happens. Yeah. So yeah. I don't know.
And when you guys got back home after all this mayhem, and things continued with your hearing loss, did you have to be medically boarded, or you said they gave you an option, like go find another job, or you're going to lose your position?
I got med boarded out. They told me my hearing was not good enough to stay on the line. And it was kind of funny because they told me I could have a job. And I remember thinking I had a couple of interesting experiences where the first sergeant took me in his pickup truck to go to a shooting range. And I just talked to him for 45 minutes about my life. And he was asking me probing questions about what I wanted to do. And I told him I wanted to be a psychologist because I was a psych undergrad or whatever. And now the work that I'm trying to do now is kind of analogous to that, even though I won't necessarily be a psychologist. And I realize now he was probably filtering me to see if I was a dirtbag or not. You know what I mean? Because he didn't know me. Right. And he would have been the guy who was no, I'll put him in, wherever, or send him out to the radio. So again, I think being genuine is really important. My sergeant, when I left Seco, they were doing the exit interview. He's like, all right, Ritchell, what are you hoping to do? And I was like, I just want to be happy, Sergeant. I was like, fuck, why did I say that? And he looked at me, and he goes, okay, man. And that was it, because it was depressing. Yeah, I was really depressed. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to be, the guys who went to Delta Force, and there were a handful of guys that I worked with that went to Delta Force. It's you have goals for yourself, and you have all these expectations, and then life hits you, or your earplug falls out and you can't hear anymore. Yeah. You know what I mean? that's what happens, and you got to drive on. And again, I've had a lot of low moments too. So like, guys, it's just kind of normal, you know what I mean? To say what now, I've had that a lot, yeah. So that was it. I got med boarded, and then I had a couple of fishy encounters where I guess I passed whatever test the guys were putting me for to see if I was, worth letting go or not. And they all seemed to be like, hey man, good luck to you. My first sergeant told me, he goes, hey man, nobody can ever take this away from you. And that was really cool to hear from a first sergeant, because I felt really like I had failed. You know what I mean? Yeah, like I felt like so I went in feeling like I had a lot to prove to myself, like I had mentioned, and I had all these insecurities or anxieties going into the process of it. And so getting out with an injury that wasn't like a gunshot or like, a horrible injury, but having something that people can't even tell, like maybe not even believe that I have. It's just like, really? You had to get that. That was what took you out.
That was that was really nice of him to say, though. A lot of guys, unfortunately, didn't get that treatment. Who was your first sergeant at that time?
I was going to say, can I say it? Yeah, Leslie Shepard.
No, I'm afraid I don't know him, but sounds like a good guy.
Really, really, really nice person. Yeah, yeah. That meant a lot, because, like, it would have been easy to listen to some of the guys who were like, you're fucking faking it. And there's other guys who are, like, cool about it, like, hey, I'd get out, too, if I couldn't hear. You know what I mean? But, like, that's just how it is, you know what I mean? Like, I can't, my three boys, have, like, kind of speech issues, I can't hear what the hell they're saying half the time. You know what I mean? It gets garbled. It's hard for me to differentiate what you're saying. And so obviously, when you're on an objective and it's pretty important to hear what you are being told to do, that's a liability. You know what I mean? And so, like, I think it took me a long time to even understand that you could show me where my hearing was at on a chart and where it needed to be. But to me, it was still just like, God, you're such a pussy. And I'm like, whoa, what? Why did I say that? You know what I mean? Like it's just, I guess that's my personality. You know what I mean? And other guys probably like, yeah, it's just what happens. But for me, it was just different. So yeah, hearing that from my first sergeant, you see a lot of different leadership styles, and you can tell when somebody's a good leader and when they're just good at their job. There's a big difference, in my opinion, between somebody being a stud on the objective and being a good leader. You know what I mean? Like, you can be really, really good on the objective, or you could be a good leader, or you can be both. And they're, you don't have to be one or the other, but you can tell who's got it and who doesn't, I think. Well, just based on that.
It's like you say, though, hearing is one of those things, because like everybody says, I don't have good hearing, like I'm kind of deaf.
Yeah, right.
Like sometimes you go, because I have similar issues, and sometimes I'll tell people, if I'm not wearing my hearing aids, I'll go, hey, I'm hearing impaired. I'm sorry that I keep on making you repeat yourself. And people go, or I'll go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm kind of hard of hearing. And they'll go, yeah, me too. And it's like, no, like I'm really hard of hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like, yeah.
And it's weird too, because like I got hearing aids from the VA, and they're great.
Deetakos.
I don't know if you have this problem or not, but like I get in a lot of pain with my hearing when the noises are loud. Like I feel like I'm on a puke, so I get really bad headaches a lot.
Really? No.
And so I don't wear my hearing aids really, because especially with kids, like, they'll scream really loud randomly. Right. It's almost like a little IED goes off like this. And so it's like, it almost hurts too bad to have my hearing aids in. So now it's like, especially with a mask, it's really hard, because I got used to putting the lip movement with what I thought you were saying. And that was nice. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And now it's hard, but like, I don't even really wear my hearing aids, because it's more uncomfortable for me to hear those loud sounds or high pitched sounds that make it kind of feel like you're jabbing something into my brain, than just asking people to repeat themselves.
Right.
Or just be like, I didn't really catch what they were saying, but I think I know what they were saying. Right. Like that kind of thing.
You just nod and smile a lot.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like some people, you might not have that much interesting stuff to say. Right.
Right.
So you just kind of let it go, you know?
Yeah.
But,
talk to us about the origins of your novel, The Knife. Like, how did that idea kind of percolate in the back of your mind and come into being?
Well, it's interesting because again, like OPSEC, so operational security, was so thick when I was there. I didn't take a picture while I was there. I didn't write down a word. So I went from not being somebody who did anything but read to writing a book. And the reason I did that is because of my wife. Like I was finishing up my my undergraduate degree in business after I got a Ranger Regiment, and I had finished all my business classes, and I was going to my senior year. And I was like, great, I finished all this business education, and I'm realizing I don't want to go into business at all. I was like, what should I do? Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, you're reading all the time, because I would take the train to class, you know, into Chicago from the suburb where we were at. And so I was reading for about 3 to 4 hours every day. So I was going through a book every like 2 to 3 days. And she's like, well, you read so much, why don't you try writing? And so I was like, okay. So I just started writing, and that was the story that I needed to tell. You know, that was, you know, I mean, when you get back from whatever you do or see in the service, it's different for everybody. But I obviously had a lot in my head, a lot of thoughts about it. And so I just started writing a little bit, and then I kept writing a little bit, and then I kind of got addicted to it. And I think I have a more addictive personality than not. And so it's kind of like instead of a workout program, it's like a mental workout program. You know what I mean? Where it feels good after a while. And, you know, you torture yourself and you think you suck at it. It's like you just keep going, and then you feel better and better. And it just starts to feel good. The same way a marathon can feel good. And you're like, you're a psychopath. It's like, no, it gets there. It gets sweet. You know, that's how writing is. Like it can be cathartic after you do it. So I ended up getting into an MFA program at Northwestern University. And I had written a whole first draft of my book before I even got in there. And then over that time, I used a GI Bill for that, which is sweet. I mean, the GI Bill has got to be one of the most revolutionary socialist instruments that our country affords its citizens and those who have served, which is just a great thing. And so I used that to get my MFA. And then I was working a job I did not like in advertising sales when my first son was born. And my wife, again, was like, well, you've got that book. Why don't you write that at work? And so I just revised and rewrote at work. And then I submitted it. Literary agent at Inkwell Management, William Callahan, liked it. And he signed me. We ended up getting a book deal that was my salary for an advance, and I quit my job.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's fantastic.
And it lasted for a year, and then the money ran out, and we had to go get another job. That's like, you know what I mean? So, you know, that's it, you know. But you're lucky sometimes. We got lucky, and then we just had to go hustle again, you know. So that's kind of how it is. But, yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of people should write because it helps you order your thoughts. From a therapy standpoint, it's super helpful to write about things that you're thinking about a lot. It's a very cathartic experience. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to write, you know, just because you had some issues you want to think about. It's just a good way to order yourself in a fast-paced world where not a lot of things make sense, to be honest with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say. Yeah, that was kind of the process. I used to write in the early stages with my combat boots on, and I would have a dip in, and I would write at night because I wanted to kind of channel what I was feeling. Right. And I would listen to the playlists. I listened to the playlists and the music that I would listen to over there, you know. And then I ended up getting diagnosed with PTSD in 2015. So, like, as my book was getting published, I got diagnosed with PTSD. And so I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I was basically like making myself think about it. And then I was like, God, I'm not okay, you know? And so
yeah,
that happens, you know. And again, you can't be ashamed of it. You know, like I kind of look at it like, hey man, I kind of had, you know, experiences that made me say, I don't agree with that. You know what I mean? And so it's like, instead of looking at it again like a pussy, it's like, no, man, you're a good person. You know what I mean? Like, you had problems with some shit. You know what I mean? And your heart kind of revolted at certain things. And so I'm proud of that in a lot of ways, because I'm like, even though I was, like I could see a guy at my feet who had taken a couple rounds to the face. And when that happens, the structure of the face crumples in on itself. So it's very interesting because they almost don't look like a human being anymore. You know what I mean? That didn't bother me. I was ready for it. You know what I mean? So I would keep the dip in. You know what I mean? But then I'd see a dead little boy in a corner like this. Wouldn't even see his face. He was just like this with his hand up and his head to the wall. And then I'd see, my firstborn son sleeping like that in a crib. You know what I mean? And I'd just be like, fuck. And that was the time when I saw it, I had to take my dip out for that. Yeah. So it's like, those are the things where my heart would revolt. And I'd be like, I am not okay with that. You know what I mean? And so it's almost like, if you can look at, a PTSD diagnosis as a defect, that no, man, that's you coming through. That's the humanity coming through the chaos and saying, let me out. This isn't right. So it's like, embrace that part of yourself. Say, it's not that I can't take it. It's that I'm not meant to take that. I can take the seeing people shot in the face thing, but they got to be of age. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
When you have the thing that's not okay, good. You should have a problem with that. And if you don't, that's when you need to worry about stuff. So, you know what I mean? That's my opinion on it. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
So you were discharged in, was it 2008, 2009?
2008. Okay. Yeah. May 2008.
And then it was 2015 when you were diagnosed with PTSD. I don't know how much you want to share, and feel free to share or not share whatever you do. But after 7 years, sort of like what led to you realizing you're seeking help or that diagnosis happening?
Yeah. I mean, it was, I didn't really drink a lot. I drank a lot in high school. Again, I was very depressed. I had a lot of anxiety in high school, and I used that to feel okay. So I kind of stopped drinking in Ranger Regiment, which is good. That's a good time to not be drinking, in my opinion, because that means when I got back, I didn't really drink a lot. But I had my antenna up all the time. I was very paranoid. I did not want to be out. I would go out to eat with my wife, and there would be like fans in the ceiling, and it would just freak me out. I'd be like, I don't want to drive. I don't want to do this. I have to go out with a big knife on me. You know what I mean? And then I was just like seeing, people at bars or social establishments that you go to. I feel like I would always catch the eye of somebody who wanted trouble. And I'd be like, I'm gonna find trouble even though I'm not drinking and not looking for it. So it was just like, I totally disengaged from society. You know what I mean? And I, my wife, again, there's a common theme, and that my wife is very smart. And she had kind of been like, hey, like, will you talk to somebody? Will you talk to somebody? And eventually my buddy from Second Bat came to visit us in 2015, and we were all talking, and he's like, yeah, I got diagnosed with it. He's like, you need to go too. You got it. And I was like, and my wife then was like, you need to go, Ross. You know what I mean? And so it was just like one of those things where it's like, again, you don't realize it. For me, it just seemed like that's normal. Like I liked being out. I liked seeing people. I liked the possibilities of social dynamics before. And when I came back, I saw threats. I saw unhappiness. I was no longer stimulated by being out. I was very on edge. I could not calm down. I was always looking at people's bodies for weapons. A woman would come in on a public transportation, and I'd be like, is that a woman or is it a man? And it's not like psychosis. It's just like, you can't turn it off. Right. You know what I mean? And so like, for me, it was just heady in that way. Again, like, I've always been prone to depression and anxiety. So like, again, like, am I really going to be able to see what was really going on? Probably not. But eventually, to answer your question, Dave, it was like, my buddy from Second Bat and my wife told me, you need to go see somebody. And then I remember when I went to the VA, they were asking me questions. And eventually I was like, holy shit, I'm here for PTSD, aren't I? And I remember like telling her, and she was really sweet, really nice, very calm and nice. And again, like, I didn't feel stigmatized at all. I stigmatized myself.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I remember telling her, like, I don't want this. I told her that. I was like, I don't want, I was like, yeah, but it's not something you bought in return.
Right.
That's not what it is. It's like, you got it, dude.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and then I remember when I drove back from that appointment, I felt a lot lighter because it was almost like maybe I knew something wasn't right in me, and maybe it just kind of took somebody else telling me, hey, it's not normal to see certain things that you saw. And if you had an adverse reaction to it, don't even look at it as adverse. Just say, yeah, that's not normal.
Right.
Now what? And then just let it go there.
Right.
Now what? You know?
Right.
And again, that's why I kind of came to the thing. It's like my morality or my heart revolted to certain things that weren't cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To certain things that if my kids were to see it, I'd be like, come here, give me a hug. You know what I mean? You all right? Like, I love you. Like, are you okay? Things I don't want them to see or be a part of. And now I say that happened or I was a part of certain things. So it's okay for me to be like, yeah, I can be like a gnarly dude and still be like, yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not okay. You know? And so it was just a progression for myself. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question, Dave.
No, it did. Thank you. No, it did.
There was no like coming to Jesus moment for me. I'm not religious. So it was just like, I listen to my wife and I listen to people that are courageous enough to tell me they care about me and they're worried about me.
Yeah.
You know? And that's the thing I think people have to realize is like, I remember like Sergeant Shanneman took his life and he to me, he was a badass. Like, he was not in my platoon, but he was just this dude who just looked like, you'd see him like you're a Ranger. You know what I mean? And he took his life. And so it's like, dude, people are going through stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's not like you look a certain way and can say, oh, that person can or cannot handle it. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody has a different threshold for everything.
Right.
And if you hit your threshold, you hit your threshold.
Right.
And it's nothing against you. You know what I mean? It's just, that's where you're at. It's your height. You can't become 6'6" if you're 5'10".
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing, you know? So
it's such an individual thing too, right? What triggers one person might not trigger another person, but they might have a totally different, you know, it's not a universal sort of, if this happens to you or if you go through this, this is how you're going to feel. So so everybody has their own personal narrative that's equally valid when it comes to something like that.
Yeah. And again, it's like, you know, you might have had 7 deployments and you might not have saw what I saw. Mm-hmm. So don't even talk about that shit. You know what I mean? Because maybe I take you and see what I saw and you get worse than I do. Right. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the whole thing is like, there's always like a sizing up contest anyway in the military. So the second that starts happening with like trauma, it's just like, no, don't even listen to it, dude. That is not a conversation worth having with anybody. If there's anything but support from people, see ya. Doesn't matter. Because like, what are they going to do? They're going to take 10 years to unwind anyway. You know what I mean? And then they will have it. You know what I mean? It's like, I think it's something that more people should just try to think on and say, am I happy? If you're not, okay, well, don't you want to be happy? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, don't you want to be a good dad? Mm-hmm. Don't you want to be a good husband, a good friend, somebody, you know, like, that's the thing. It's like, there's so much insecurity in people to begin with. And then not going to war brings out certain insecurities, or going to war and not seeing combat brings out insecurity. It's like, everybody's going to get insecure about something. And so if you're having a hard time about it, just be like, hey, it's like, if you need to go on a diet or you need a workout plan, just go for it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like,
are you calling me fat?
Yeah. You know what I mean? No, but you're, no, but you're, no, you know what I mean? I don't know. I think it's a lot easier to just be a good person and try to be a lot more gentle, especially ironically, if you've done hard things and seen hard things and had like a harder persona for a while, it feels good to be like, I don't necessarily need that. I can be a good person and more interesting or more unique by being gentle or soft or kind. I don't have to have that, like persona anymore.
I think no, that's absolutely right, and I think one of the things that we all struggle with this as the special ops community, if you will, is that our public persona is that we're these big badasses. But then if you look at the statistical breakdown of our suicide rates, which are much higher than average, these two narratives don't really mesh up. I mean, if you're the biggest badasses in the world, it does not make sense that you're killing yourself in these high rates.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that you can't be a badass. What I'm saying is that you're a badass dude. Like, you should also, as you said, go and get help if you need it, because there's more going on beneath the surface than just the persona.
Right, and then you're totally right, but I think it's just like you have to look at what you're thinking as weakness as just something that's misunderstood. Mm-hmm. It's not a weakness. Right. Like, you think about it, like how many guys in whatever unit you're with were totally obsessed with any deficiency physically, and they would go spend all this time in the gym to iron that out or sculpt this body part. Like, yeah, but if I told you your mind wasn't quite there yet, or you had wouldn't you want to change that too? So it doesn't make any sense. If you look at it as something that you can improve and get better with, it doesn't make any sense to not try to do that. Right. You know what I mean? And so that's the kind of thing you kind of have to look at it as almost like, well, it's a workout regime. Like, start doing stuff that's going to help you feel better. You know what I mean? Because you can't hide it. You're just gonna bring it out by being an asshole to other people, by being standoffish, by being an alcoholic, by being, over aggressive, by being somebody that other people don't want to be around. You know what I mean? So is that what you want? Because you're afraid of kind of confronting something that is there anyway, and you're trying to hide from it? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't necessarily think that it's always that, like, guys are trying to avoid it and want to put on an air or not face up to it. I think that, a lot of the people that are successful in special operations are successful because they've learned to drive through problems, right? They've learned to suck it up, and they've learned to, tighten up those ruck straps, drop their head, and just keep on driving. And I think that a lot of people who get mired in post-traumatic stress try that same approach. Yeah. And
for sure.
And it's not that necessarily that they're trying to pretend anything so much as they're trying to solve that problem the way that every it's always worked before. And I think and I think the other nefarious sort of insidious thing about post-traumatic stress is, like, you didn't know you were in it when you were in it, right? Mm-hmm. It took people from the outside, and more than just your wife, it took somebody who had a shared experience with you going, check this out.
You have it.
Right?
Yeah, you have it. Yeah.
And and so I think that, like I said, I think that post-traumatic stress can be really insidious because I think that a lot of people caught in the throes of it aren't even aware of it. It's this.
No, I think it's a great point. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and so if we're going to talk about actionable stuff now, and not just that's what I think we need to be doing. I think we need to be talking about what to do about that and how to make it better for guys.
Yeah,
I personally think that there should be a drive to have social workers, not necessarily psychs, but probably social workers embedded with units and have them go through the training the same way medics do. Because what should be normal is when you do your debrief, like, okay, we got this guy, we got this guy, we got this. Hey, how you doing? You all right with that? That was kind of fucked up. You see that? Mm-hmm. That didn't happen at all. You know what I mean? It was like, you just go do it, and then you go do whatever you do. At least for me at times, And so if you kind of normalize talking about stuff after it happens as soon as possible, in the same way that you have to, in the sense of a debrief, it makes sense that you start to get people to say, hey, I wasn't really comfortable with that. Is this cool? Or if not in that way, at least just get guys talking about what's going on.
Right.
Because again, it's that, yes, you're right, Dave, when you're probably talking about, it's something, if they realize it or not, they nevertheless can drive through it. But it's almost like, well, maybe they're going to start realizing it more if they start talking about what happened or what they saw or what they don't like or what they're feeling. Because without that kind of repetition, you can't even realize your ankle's hurting if you aren't looking at what's hurting in your body and listening to your body. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Because again, you also have to have that that mentality that you are training for it, so you should not have a problem with anything. And so it's kind of hard because everybody's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, for me, it took 7 years for me to get out, feel like I was doing great and I didn't have any problems. And then it was like, whoa, I haven't seen my friends in like 6 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I literally, like, years have gone by where I see my friends once or twice.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, I guess that's depression, isn't it? Or I guess that's anxiety, right? Where you just say no to everything.
Right.
Like, no, I'm good, man. No, I'm good. You know what I mean? It's sad. It's hard to put your finger on it.
Yeah.
Ross, tell us what your book is about and where people can find it.
So my book is called The Knife. And I basically just wanted to, again, I kind of felt like a journalist. I didn't really even feel, I felt like a journalist now. I didn't feel like a journalist when I was writing it or when I was at war, but I guess I looked at my experience as more of a journalist. So what I wanted to really do with the book was kind of take people on a deployment. That was it. I just wanted you to be like, hey, this is what it was like for me. And that's kind of it. And I didn't want it to be like Hollywood. I wanted it to be gritty and raw. One of the reviews said it wasn't literary, and I was like, I don't care.
Who the fuck cares?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that was, I didn't like set out to write something that was going to be like canonical or whatever you want to say. It's like, I set out to write something that I wanted my kids to read in case I die early and can't tell them what it was like, so that they don't grow up thinking that war is some sweet thing that they're going to go taste. I wanted them to know what's gnarly about it, what's good about it, what's exciting about it, and scary about it. And I felt like I hadn't read something like that as much before, definitely not about the war I was in. So like, I was like, I'm going to go do that. Yeah, I mean, you can get it anywhere. The Amazon bookstores have it. Yeah, I mean, again, I just wanted people to read it and not feel good. Some of the most helpful reviews are the ones like, this book's too depressing. And I'm like, well, there you go.
I have a copy of it on my shelf, Ross, and I'm sorry that I have not read it. We read the books of our guests like 95% of the time, but sometimes it's on such short notice we don't have time. And so I'll line it up though.
And just so you guys know, like, one of our guests had to drop. Unfortunately, he'll be with us in the future. But Ross Rogered up,
rangered up.
Sua Sponte and jumped in. Yeah, so we really appreciate you, man.
Let's
my pleasure.
Let's take some we got some viewer questions and comments here for you, Ross.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Ep made some donation here. Thank you, man.
And it'll buy 1/10 of a bottle of this. So thank you.
Tacit is asking us making a guest request. I'll look into it, man. M. Tchenek. Mukhtar al-Sadr has come back out into the news again. What trajectory do you see this following?
I'm not aware.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah. I try not to.
He might be next PM. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Iran hard at work there.
Yeah. Jackson says, how would you characterize the differences between the different CT units you've worked with, from CAG to Dev Group to HRT? And was there any sort of rivalry between any of you guys?
So I worked with SEAL teams and Air Force PJs. So I didn't work with Green or with any HRT elements. I think there's usually a rivalry. I mean, that's just how you're going to get that within battalion. Like, you get that within squads. That's just human beings.
Yeah.
In terms of different capabilities, one thing I realize is, like, everybody's capable in their own way, and everybody's good at different stuff. And then you'll see other guys that maybe are not. So it's just like, it's too hard to paint everybody with a broad brush. You know what I mean? I think everybody's unique, even if they're all serving in one unit. You know what I mean? So, yeah. It's too diverse to say.
Jackson asks, on the subject of overexposure in combat and overaggression, do you think SOF at large should impose combat deployment limits for Rangers or operators?
That's a good question. Probably not, because you'd be losing a lot of really good guys. I do think that you need to have a hell of a lot more insight into what guys are going through, what they're seeing, what they are doing on deployments. Yeah, I mean, again, no, like if you've got the best guys out there, you need the best guys out there. But if they're not the best guys out there, I think it's more of a question to say, well, how do you identify that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you identify the guys that shouldn't be out there anymore?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of thing I think that needs to be kind of spoken to more. Because again, like there's a lot of guys that could do it 10, 15 times and be okay and be good people and good human beings. I mean, but maybe not. So it's kind of that thing, you know?
Medi Wizard says, I also got med boarded, but from the pilot pipeline for hearing. Crazy hearing you share that your experience. Mine was similar. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Sorry you went through that. Yeah.
K-Jam, do you work with the Center for Deployment Psychology by any chance? They have a CPT PTSD protocol. You would be amazing working with other survivors considering your unique direct experience.
No, I do not, but I'll look them up because that sounds really cool. And thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Books by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman are something I wish I read before basic training, and podcasts like and Jocko I wish existed when I first got out.
Well, when he first got out, yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that is beneficial is shows like this and Jocko and all the other shows where guys are coming on and talking about their experiences, and so maybe the guys out there that are isolating are like realizing, like I'm not unique in this. I'm not alone in this.
No, not at all, man. Like I don't think I'm unique at all in any way. Like I did what I did. I wrote a book, and I don't think I'm unique at all. I think there's a lot more people like me than not. you know what I mean?
We think you're unique.
I think it's really good though, Ross, when someone like you comes forward, when someone like Tom Spooner, who is an operator and deployed like 12 times, and he's a badass guy, but he came forward and said like, "Hey, I have this. I deal with this. This is a real thing." And I think that helps a lot of the younger guys out there give themselves permission to go and seek treatment.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just got to be real to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that name is Question Anything or Question Everything. I think the Chinese is Question Everything.
Okay.
Yeah. And Brad, thanks, man.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. His name I believe it's Chinese characters, but I'm not sure. Brad, did you go through treatment for PTSD, and what about it worked for you?
Did I?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was diagnosed with 70% PTSD. I went through like the social work program that they have for that. I think it was helpful. The problem with PTSD is it's different for everybody. Mm-hmm. So again, it's gonna kind of factor into not just what you're kind of looking at for like treatment, but what changes are you implementing after it that are gonna either keep you on a path or make you go back. A lot of it's like environmentally based. Mm-hmm. For me, when I do like tips and tricks real quick, that's good. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing was by myself, I started shadow boxing. So like, don't go out and start getting in fights. But to me, the feeling of kind of fighting back against feeling weak helped a lot. So what I would do was I would turn on the English Premier League soccer, and I would, for the whole first half, because it's 45 minutes straight, I would just box. Just myself in a room. And after that, you feel good. Mm-hmm. So find something that you can do consistently workout wise and do it, even if it's walking or whatever. And then mindfulness stuff helps a lot. Breathing works really well. Sometimes you need medication. I've used a couple different medications. It's just one of those things where I would highly suggest not using recreational substances to cope. THC was something I used for a long time until, my wife was like, "Hey, this isn't working for you anymore," which really meant, "Hey, this isn't working for me anymore." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Okay, I hear you." You know what I mean? But yeah, stay away from that stuff if you can. If you're going to do it, try to make sure that you're using it in a responsible manner and not leaning on it like a crutch, because there's actual medications that you're supposed to use it for a crutch, not that stuff. It's different for everybody though. Again, try to not look at it as a weakness, trying to look at it as more like you said, question everything. Try to look at it like you're trying to figure yourself out. You know what I mean? This isn't a weakness. You're trying to iron out and get a better marathon time. You know what I mean? Try to look at it like that. You know, it's really helpful to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 8 seconds, release it for 12 seconds, do stuff like that. You know what I mean? You need to start breathing and paying attention to breathing through your nose and not out your mouth. So you go like this. Try to not breathe out of your mouth anymore. A lot of people that smoke cigarettes find it helpful, but it's not the nicotine. The nicotine gets you going. What's helping them is they're taking deep breaths when they inhale. That's what's calming. They're taking deep breaths when they inhale. So breathing helps a lot. Try to calm down stuff. Painting helps. Writing helps. Eating healthy helps. I would say have kids, but I don't think that helps. I think that helps with perspective. I don't know. Just take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And however you define it, you know.
So tell us where you are today. I mean, you mentioned you have 5 kids, you're married, you're in a PhD program. I mean, what is where does life find for us today?
So I work in a financial trading firm. I do the night shifts from 4:30 to midnight. I work with algorithmic traders. I watch all of their trades. I basically manage our portfolio when it's going on. And in addition to that, I'm at the University of Alabama getting my PhD in communication studies. I want to kind of focus on interpersonal communications. So how we talk to people, why we talk to them. And I'm kind of trying to figure out like a notion of like capability, like why certain people will try things and other people will not. Mm-hmm. Why people believe in themselves and other people don't. Like, because I look at the themes of my life and anything that I've accomplished, I've done it doubting myself. So I'm kind of wondering why that is. You know, I have a brand on my forearm and it's the letters NQ, because before I went to RIP, I branded NQ into my arm, never quit, as if I needed like a reminder that I was like not going to let myself quit. But it's like, why am I built that way when the guy next to me might never doubt himself for a second? You know, so I'm trying to kind of unravel that stuff. I would like to work in that capacity at some point, however I can. That's where you'll find me right now. I'm not sleeping a whole lot, but that's pretty much every parent. I don't know. I'm a lucky person. I feel good to be alive. I feel good to have a wife who thinks I'm good enough to stay with. I don't know. That's where I'm at right now. I don't know where I'm going to be. I didn't think I was going to live to be this old. I'm 34. I know that's not old, but I thought I was going to die at like 23, 21.
And we all do.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, right? So, like, and that's the thing. It's like, hey, hold on, man. Just stay for a while. You know, you've got things to do until you don't. Mm. You know what I mean? You know, there's a saying. It's like, quit tomorrow. Mm. Don't quit today. Right. Quit tomorrow. You know what I mean? And then tomorrow just keeps going. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's a good thing. You know what I mean?
Is there another Ross Ritchell novel in the future? Do you think you have another one in you somewhere?
I don't know. I mean, not everybody. Nobody really gives a shit. But, you know, people have been like, oh, you should write a sequel. I'm like, well, that wrote itself. That's probably out. I wrote a novel about the Civil War, and I've written a novel about Native Americans that haven't gotten picked up and probably won't, whether they're shit or whatever. I don't know. I'm doing a lot of academic writing right now, and I got an MA in journalism. So whether or not the writing continues, it certainly does. In what capacity it will, I don't know yet. I really love writing. I think writing's really important. And I think that I'm supposed to write in different ways. So if there's going to be a novel, I don't know, but there's definitely going to continue to be content, and it'll just be, you know, finding that and figuring out what to do.
I mean, it sounds like you have the perfect audience for a children's book.
I would say so. You know, my wife is getting into that. she's very creative herself, so she'll probably be on bookshelves for that. But yeah, I think everything I would say is extremely applicable to children.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We have 2 more questions just came up. Isaac asks, is there a good stock to invest in right now?
That's probably illegal to answer that question.
I would say the best advice I heard is don't take anybody's advice.
There you
so
go.
You should do your own research. And then, that's all I'll say.
Except for deep fucking value. He nailed it pretty well. But anyway, and then he's the guy that nailed the game stock or the game shop or the game. Yeah. And Gene Colley said, Kyle Carpenter observed that everyone has trauma. We can bridge a lot of divides if we start granting each other space and support to heal.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And again, I think just checking in with yourself is important. Be like, hey, am I a happy person? Like, ask yourself that. And if you can't really say, yeah, be like, well, that's not a good thing. Well, maybe figure it out a little bit. You don't have to tell other people. Like, I'm very open about it because I've been through it and I've had book talks where that kind of content comes out. And so I kind of feel like when I do a talk like this, that's the stuff I should be talking about because that's the stuff that people that need to hear it, like I needed to hear it, will pick up their ears more. You know what I mean? So you don't have to talk to other people about it. You don't have to do what I'm doing and be like, hey, man, I have this and that. That's the conscious choice I make because I know there's at least one person listening or reading or maybe going to read it in a year to be like, oh, well, I kind of have that because I know that I was that person. So I kind of look at it as being like, if I can do what I needed, it's going to find somebody eventually. So you don't have to broadcast it. You don't have to like be like, I'm a survivor of this. Like, don't do that if you don't want to, but you should be doing that by yourself, in my opinion, especially if you've got people in your life that will be affected by anything that you're not addressing.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
It reminds me of that, was it Philo? Philo who said, be kind, everybody you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's who said it, but it doesn't matter because that's incredibly apt. And that's true. And it's important. And I think our society, especially right now, is divided as everybody is. It's just like we start, assigning a lot of things to people pretty quickly. And I think that you should ask why you're doing that. Like maybe if you're really a person that's kind of getting aggravated a lot, it might not be other people. Maybe you got to figure some stuff out in your life.
No, it's definitely other people.
Yeah, I know. It's not everybody. It's right.
Those assholes in New York.
This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us.
We deeply appreciate it
tonight, Ross.
Yeah, man.
I hope that everyone out there will go and check out The Knife by Ross Ritchell. It's on Amazon and wherever else books are sold. You can find it.
There's a link to it down in the description.
And otherwise, thank you for joining us tonight and checking out the show. Please leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Give us a little thumbs up or thumbs down. Check the links down there. There's a link to our Patreon if you want to have access to the bonus segments and extra episodes we do. There's also a link to our merch, the coffee mugs and T-shirts. I always forget to mention it, but that's down there as well. And rate the podcast on iTunes. It helps.
Yeah. Give us some love and give Ross some love. We really appreciate, man. We love you.
Next episode.
Thank you.
Next episode is going to be Douglas London, career CIA officer. He is the author of The Recruit. We're going to have him on next Friday. So thank you, everyone, and we'll catch